Have you ever walked into a room and felt overwhelmed before anyone said a word? Do you sometimes feel drained after spending time with certain people, even though nothing bad happened? What if the emotions you've been carrying were never yours to begin with? This is more than a question, it's a turning point. Every day, millions of people suffer in silence. They feel anxious without cause, sad for no reason, heavy in places that should feel light. They try to fix themselves, meditate more, cut out sugar, take deep breaths, think positive, but something still feels off. And that off is what brings them here, now. Because what if you're not broken? What if you're simply absorbing emotional energy that doesn't belong to you? If you're an empath, you already know what it means to carry others' emotions. But most empaths aren't even aware that's what they are. They're just tired, burnt out, lost in emotional noise that isn't theirs. They're sponges, emotional sponges, soaking up every sadness, fear, or frustration in their environment, from family, from crowds, from scrolling on social media, from unspoken pain hanging in the room. Science calls this emotional absorption. Psychology calls it identification. Neuroscience explains it with mirror neurons and limbic resonance. Spirituality says it's energetic entanglement. But for you, the one living it, it just feels like confusion. Like you're constantly carrying something invisible and heavy. And no matter how much you rest, that weight never really goes away. That's because you're not releasing what isn't yours. This video is for every soul who's felt like they're drowning in emotions they can't name. For every empath feeling drained. For everyone asking, why do I feel sad for no reason? Why do I absorb others' emotions? How do I protect my energy from people without shutting down my heart? The answers aren't just scientific. They're spiritual, they're psychological, they're embodied. And they begin right here, not with information, but with recognition. You're about to remember what your body already knows. You are not meant to carry the weight of the world. You're meant to feel, to witness, to understand, but not to absorb and collapse under the emotional burdens of others. You're not being weak. You're being too open. And now, it's time to take your power back. There's a moment, often quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize you're feeling something that doesn't belong to you, not because someone said anything, not because anything happened, but because your body reacts before your mind can catch up. A wave of sadness, a tightness in your chest, a heaviness behind your eyes. You look around searching for the source and still, nothing. Just energy, just atmosphere, just something you can't explain. That's emotional absorption, and it's more common than most people realize. Empaths live inside a world of subtle signals, facial expressions, tones of voice, micro-reactions. All of it lands deep in the nervous system, even when it's not conscious. That's how you end up carrying others' emotions, as if they were your own. You walk through a storm that isn't yours, and yet you feel soaked. And because you were never taught to tell the difference between empathy and emotional entanglement, you internalize the storm instead of recognizing it. You start thinking, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? Am I too sensitive? You're not. You're someone who was never given a map for emotional boundaries. No one explained to you that there's a difference between compassion and collapse, between sensing someone's sadness and taking it on as your identity. You didn't ask to feel everything, but your system, your wiring, your field, it's wide open. And without awareness, openness turns to overload. In families, empaths often become the emotional regulators, the peacemakers, the energetic absorbers of tension. They carry what no one else is willing to feel. As children, this may have felt like love. As adults, it becomes exhaustion. This invisible weight is real. It lives in your gut, in your sleep patterns, in your energy levels. And no matter how much you try to stay positive, it follows you because it was never yours to begin with. You've been living inside other people's emotional frequencies, frequencies that drain your clarity, your vitality, your joy. But now, you're starting to see it. You're recognizing that not every feeling is yours to carry. That emotional absorption isn't empathy, it's entanglement. And the first step to reclaiming your energy is to see what's actually happening beneath the surface. The weight you feel, it's not yours. And that truth changes everything. Every emotion we experience has a direction, It moves, it transfers, and most of us are exchanging emotional energy all day long without realizing it. In psychology, this invisible exchange is called transference, when someone projects their unresolved feelings onto another person. Maybe anger that was never expressed toward a parent suddenly gets directed at you. Maybe someone's guilt, shame, or sadness finds you as a silent recipient. It happens constantly. You become the emotional screen where others play their unprocessed stories. But there's another side to it. Countertransference. That's when your nervous system unconsciously responds, mirroring or absorbing what the other person projects. It's a dance between unconscious minds, where energy speaks louder than words. And empaths? They feel every step of that dance. They don't just notice the projection, they become the projection. They feel the anger, the fear, the grief, and believe it's their own. Imagine this. Someone enters your space carrying tension. They say they're fine, but their body vibrates with unrest. Your mirror neurons activate. Your limbic system synchronizes. Without thought, your heart rate rises, your breathing shifts. You start carrying what they couldn't contain. That's not imagination, it's biology. It's limbic resonance, the way our emotional systems align and reflect one another. It's how humans connect, and also how empaths suffer. Empaths become emotional translators in a world that doesn't know its own language. They read energy fluently, but forget to translate it back to themselves. Over time, their bodies become museums of other people's pain. Stories never told, tears never cried, anger never released. And because this process happens subconsciously, they mistake resonance for responsibility. But you are not responsible for everything you feel. You're simply aware of it. That awareness is a gift, not a burden, but only when you learn to hold it consciously. Every emotional exchange is like a conversation between two fields. If you don't know where you end and the other begins, you lose yourself in the dialogue. Transference and countertransference aren't just therapeutic concepts. They're the architecture of daily relationships. They explain why some people drain you, why others light you up, why silence in a room can still feel loud. When you start observing these exchanges without judging, fixing, or absorbing, you step out of the trance. You stop being the actor in someone else's unfinished play. And you begin to remember that empathy was never meant to hurt. It was meant to connect, not consume. There is nothing vague about what you're feeling. What seems like mystery is, in many ways, measurable. Empathy lives in the brain. It has circuits, patterns, and mechanisms that explain why you feel what others feel, sometimes before they even speak. And it all starts with mirror neurons. These are the brain's empathic antennas, firing not only when you move or feel, but also when you witness someone else doing the same. When a person in front of you is in pain, your mirror neurons simulate that pain inside your own nervous system. Not metaphorically, physiologically, you feel it as if it were happening to you. This is the beginning of emotional absorption, but not the end. Once the mirror neurons light up, your limbic system, the emotional core of your brain, starts synchronizing. It's a process known as limbic resonance, where nervous systems align beneath conscious awareness. Heart rates match, breathing shifts, cortisol levels mirror. In healthy connection, this creates trust and bonding. In chaotic environments, it creates collapse. Now add the reticular activating system, RAS, to the equation. This part of your brain filters what you notice: emotional tone, facial micro-expressions, posture, tone of voice. If your RAS is trained to constantly scan for unspoken tension or emotional threats, you become hyper-attuned to even the smallest energetic shifts. This makes you perceptive, but it also makes you porous. You don't just notice moods, you merge with them. And here's where the line between sensitivity and suffering gets blurry. Your nervous system was designed to tune in, but without conscious boundaries, that tuning becomes overexposure. What should be a signal turns into static. Your emotional body gets flooded with frequencies you didn't choose, and you can no longer tell what's yours and what you've absorbed. This is why empaths so often report feeling tired without reason, anxious in crowds, overwhelmed by people's stories. It's not all in your head, it's in your wiring. And understanding the science gives you something crucial: permission. You're not weak, you're neurobiologically sensitive. And when you learn to work with that sensitivity instead of against it, everything changes. You stop pathologizing your depth, you start protecting your energy. Because the brain doesn't just absorb, it can also learn to filter. But that filtering doesn't happen through force. It happens through conscious retraining, creating vibrational boundaries, emotional clarity, and intentional presence. The more you understand how your system works, the less you become a victim of it, and the more you become the one who chooses what enters your field. Empathy was never meant to be a burden, but when you confuse feeling with carrying, what begins as connection turns into self-erasure. You were born with a sensitive nervous system, not to suffer, but to sense. Yet somewhere along the way you were taught, directly or subtly, that your sensitivity made you responsible for everyone else's emotions. That if someone around you was in pain, it was your job to hold it, to fix it, to absorb it into your own body. That's not empathy, that's emotional enmeshment. To feel is human, to absorb is unconscious. There's a line between compassion and emotional fusion, but no one teaches us where it is. We learn to be kind, to be understanding, to put ourselves in others' shoes. But no one tells us what to do when we can't get out of those shoes, when we wake up in a fog of emotion that doesn't belong to us, but that we've internalized so deeply we believe it does. This is how empaths end up depleted, resentful, confused, not because they care too much, but because they've been carrying too much for too long. Your soul was not designed to be a container for everyone else's chaos. The truth is, empathy without boundaries becomes suffering. Not only for you, but for those around you. When you carry what isn't yours, you prevent others from facing their own emotional reality. You rob them of growth while slowly losing touch with your own center. You become a sponge, not a source. You take in but never release. You confuse presence with self-sacrifice. But presence has nothing to do with collapse. Presence is witnessing, not absorbing. It's holding space without losing your own. It's standing beside someone in the fire while remembering that you are not the flame. Feeling doesn't mean fusing. Compassion doesn't mean collapse. And love doesn't mean self-abandonment. This distinction is not just intellectual, it's somatic. It lives in your breath, your posture, your tone. It's the difference between breathing with someone and hyperventilating in their place, between anchoring in empathy and drowning in energy. When you learn to hold emotional space without absorbing emotional weight, you become powerful. Not because you feel less, but because you finally know what's yours. The next step isn't to shut down, it's to learn how to stay open without bleeding out. If you've spent your life absorbing the emotional frequencies of others, your first instinct might be to shut everything out. But the real path isn't isolation, it's discernment. You don't need to close your heart to protect your energy. You need to learn how to filter what doesn't belong to you. Filtering begins with awareness. The moment you feel a shift, tightness in the chest, sudden sadness, anxiety without reason, ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Is this mine? That single question activates your reticular activating system. It reroutes the brain's default narrative and creates space for conscious observation. You're no longer inside the emotion, you're witnessing it. From there, deepen the inquiry. Is this familiar or is this current? Many empaths carry echoes, old unresolved emotional codes from childhood or past relationships that get triggered in the present. Distinguishing memory from reality is the first energetic boundary. Emotional hygiene starts with recognition, then comes grounding. Not as a buzzword, but as a nervous system practice. Slow your breath, feel your feet, anchor into the body. The more present you become in your own experience, the less likely you are to dissolve into someone else's. You're not building walls, you're growing roots. Visualization helps too, not as fantasy, but as structure for your energetic field. Imagine a golden filtration field surrounding you. Everything that enters must pass through it. You're not blocking life, you're discerning it. You're choosing what nourishes and what drains, and that choice is power. You can also program your field using somatic commands directed to your subconscious mind. I only carry what is mine. I release what no longer resonates with who I am. These are not just affirmations, they're instructions to the electromagnetic pattern of your being. Detox doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's just stepping away from the noise, putting your phone down, sitting in silence, letting the energy recalibrate without force. Other times it means saying no, not from anger but from alignment. Empaths often confuse rejection with protection, but a boundary is not a betrayal, it's a compass. And if you've absorbed something too deeply to release mentally, let your body speak, shake, breathe, move. The body knows how to let go of what the mind can't name. You're not healing through logic, you're healing through presence. You are not here to be a sponge. You are here to be a field, radiant, clear, strong, where only what aligns may remain. There comes a moment in every empath's journey when the identity of emotional sponge no longer fits. It feels too small, too passive, too heavy. Because being a sponge means you're at the mercy of the room. But you were never meant to be a passive receiver of pain. You were meant to be a conscious channel, a vessel of clarity, of compassion, of transformation. The difference between a wounded empath and an empowered one is awareness. One absorbs and suffers in silence. The other feels fully, but filters wisely. One loses themselves in the presence of others. The other becomes more anchored with every interaction. Empaths were never meant to disappear inside the energy of the world. They were meant to help recalibrate it. You don't have to close off your sensitivity. You don't have to numb your heart or pretend you don't care. What you do need is energetic leadership, the ability to say, I feel you, but I remain in myself. That's the field of the conscious healer. It's not cold, it's not guarded, it's luminous. It holds presence without collapse. It understands that emotions are data, not definitions. The empowered empath is not reactive. They are responsive. They don't walk into a room and absorb chaos. They stabilize it. They don't try to fix everyone. They see them. They witness without fusing. They breathe without absorbing. And because of this, people feel safe around them, not because they're being saved, but because they're finally being seen without judgment. This level of presence comes through practice. It means creating time to reset your field, to listen to what's yours and what isn't. It means building rituals of energy shielding, not as armor, but as sacred clarity. You are not here to heal through exhaustion. You are here to embody a truth that heals by existing. That means stepping out of the identity of the victim empath and into the presence of the vibrational guide. Healing doesn't happen when you absorb, it happens when you align. You can't elevate others by drowning in their suffering. You elevate by standing in your own light, fully present, deeply compassionate, and energetically sovereign. You were never meant to carry it all. You were meant to remember who you are when you stop carrying what's not yours. What you've called exhaustion may have been sensitivity without direction. What you've called anxiety may have been the emotional residue of others still echoing through your system. And what you've called broken was simply openness with no filter. But now you see the pattern. You feel the shift. The sponge is drying. The story is changing. You are no longer a vessel for emotional overload. You are a conscious architect of your energetic reality. And the moment you begin to choose what enters your space, your entire field reconfigures. That field, your emotional, mental, spiritual frequency, is not a passive shell. It is a living ecosystem. It responds to permission. It responds to clarity. It responds to your alignment. And this is what no one tells you. The more you align with what's true for you, the less you resonate with what is false around you. The chaos that once pulled you in begins to dissolve. Not because the world became softer, but because you became stronger in your center. You stopped being the mirror of other people's wounds and started becoming the reflection of your own truth. That's when the nervous system settles. That's when peace returns, not as an escape from life, but as a resonance within it. The triggers lose their grip. The voices that once told you to shrink grow silent. The need to fix, to carry, to rescue begins to fade. Not because you've become distant, but because you've become clear. Clarity is power, clarity is protection, clarity is compassion that doesn't collapse. And from that clarity, you become a different kind of presence. One that doesn't force, one that doesn't absorb, one that simply is. You speak less, but your field speaks for you. You try less, but your coherence does the work. That is what alignment feels like, when your energy begins to do for you what effort never could. You are not broken, you are just open. And now you get to decide what enters, what stays, what transforms, because the emotions you carry shape the reality you live. And now that you know what's yours and what never was, you can release it, not with fear, not with resentment, but with reverence, because even the energy that wasn't yours taught you how to come home to yourself.